Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha Gaines, Public Relations Manager for IQAir. Welcome, and thank you for joining our press event for the release of the 2023 World Air Quality Report. The report is a collaborative effort among IQAir's science team using data from around the world. Joining us today are IQAir Global CEO, Frank Hamas, and IQAir's Air Quality Science Manager, Dr. Christi Chester Schroeder. We'd like to begin today with a few remarks by both of our speakers, and then we'll open it up to questions from all of you. To begin, I'd like to introduce you to Frank Hamas, IQAir's Global CEO. Mr. Hamas has set IQAir's ambitious goal to provide everyone on the planet access to meaningful air quality data. Mr. Hamas believes that increased air quality awareness is essential to accelerate action against the sources of air pollution, which incidentally happen to also be major drivers for climate change. Under his leadership, IQAir is now in its 6th year in its global effort to provide the most comprehensive annual summary of the state of global air quality. Frank, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you all for joining us. The 2023 World Air Quality Report compiles and analyzes, contextualizes PM 2.5 concentrations from over 7,800 cities in 134 countries for the 2023 calendar year. IQAir's data is based on analysis of data from over 30,000 ground-level air quality monitoring stations. The report focuses on PM 2.5 as it is the most harmful and common air pollutant and causes the most pollution-related death. PM 2.5 penetrates every cell of our bodies, from the cells in our skin to cells deep in our lung and even in our brain. What's more, PM 2.5 can be measured relatively inexpensively and accurately, not just by governments, but by just about anyone. In the 2023 World Air Quality Report, just 7 countries met the WHO's annual PM 2.5 guideline value of 5 micrograms per cubic meter. These countries are Australia, Estonia, Finland, Grenada, Iceland, New Zealand, and Mauritius. The world's 3 most polluted countries in 2023 were Bangladesh, followed by Pakistan and India. All of those countries experienced PM 2.5 concentrations that were more than 10 times the WHO annual PM 2.5 guideline. Over 92% of countries exceeded those guidelines. Central and South Asia were home to the top 10 most polluted cities in the world. India was also home to the 4 most polluted cities in the world. The most polluted major city in the United States was, again, Columbus, Ohio. So that's the 2nd straight. One major theme this year was that transboundary haze was one of the leading contributors to global air pollution. Transboundary haze refers to air pollutants carried by winds across borders, which lead to contamination of air elsewhere. We saw the effects of transboundary haze throughout multiple areas in the world, with wildfires in North America during the summer of 2023 being among the most prominent. Wildfires in Canada devastated air quality not only in Canada itself, but caused hazardous level of air quality in the United States, where multiple cities in the Midwest and Northeast saw significantly increased levels of polluted air. Southeast Asia also experienced transboundary haze, with pollutants from agricultural burning as well as factory and fossil fuel emissions carrying across various countries in the region. In Asia, we're seeing that in 2023, many of the improvements that we've seen in previous years have come to a stop, and in some cases have reversed themselves. We saw marked increases in air pollution in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Indonesia. Even China slipped back and lost some of the air quality gains it has made over the past 2 years. This was apparent in cities like Beijing and Shanghai that saw a year-over-year increase in air pollution of 14% and 13% respectively. With an estimated 7 million premature deaths worldwide every year, air pollution is the greatest environmental threat to human health. By releasing this report, IQAir hopes to engage, inform, and inspire governments industry, and citizens to take action to accelerate the effort to reduce air pollution and to improve the health of millions of global citizens.
Thank you, Frank. Next, please meet Dr. Christi Chester Schroeder, the IQAir Air Quality Science Manager. Christi holds a PhD in physical chemistry from the University of Southern California and has over a decade of air quality experience that spans positions in the regulatory community, academia, and the private sector. Christi, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. And I appreciate all of you being with us today. I'd like to speak a little further about how IQAir collects and calculated the data used in the World Air Quality Report. IQAir's Air Visual platform aggregates real-time air quality data from more than 30,000 air quality monitoring stations all around the world. The data is generated from air quality monitoring equipment, including government-operated regulatory instruments and low-cost sensor stations. Before the data gets published on our platform, it undergoes a comprehensive quality assurance review to ensure we are communicating the most accurate data possible. Stations record PM2.5 concentration measurements every hour throughout the year. Each station has more than 8,700 hours of data. We carefully review and compile the data from each individual station. The stations are then grouped by city to produce city-level annual average PM2.5 concentrations that you find in the World Air Quality Report. Only cities that meet our minimum data completion criteria of 60% data availability are included in the report. This city data is then weighted by population to create the annual averages reported for countries, regions, and territories. There are multiple areas in the world where access to air quality data is severely lacking. Africa remains the most underrepresented continent when it comes to air quality monitoring. More than 1/3 of Africa's population lacks access to air quality data. As Frank said, the global air quality monitoring network needs to be expanded to cover more underrepresented areas so we can properly address air quality and health impacts. Africa as a whole has less than 300 air quality monitors producing real-time, publicly available air quality data, lagging far behind the rest of the world. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 70% of the region's air quality monitoring data comes from low-cost sensors. This percentage demonstrates citizen scientist involvement in measuring their community's air quality, but also shows a need for more government-operated regulatory instruments. There are still dozens of countries that are not included in the 2023 World Air Quality Report due to a lack of air quality data. Expanding the global air quality monitoring network is crucial because data collection is really the first step in achieving meaningful impact in addressing air pollution. Data empowers communities to advocate for change and informs policy decisions. The 2023 World Air Quality Report speaks directly to the link between air quality and climate change. Air pollution and climate change have one major culprit: the use of fossil fuels. Fossil fuel emissions account for 65% of global CO2 emissions and are also a primary cause of the majority of PM2.5 related deaths. Climate change can also alter weather patterns, affecting the dispersal and removal of PM2.5 from the atmosphere. Major weather events played a huge role in air pollution in the past year. With catastrophic weather events becoming more severe and frequent, projections indicate air quality issues will also become more severe. The easiest way to reduce air pollution is to decrease the use of fossil fuels. We need to allocate resources to fund renewable energy initiatives. The global air quality monitoring network needs to be expanded to cover more underrepresented areas so that we can properly address air quality and health impacts. Wildfires have become more severe due to the effects of climate change. Washington State has traditionally been heavily affected by wildfires. However, in 2023, the state's wildfire season was more mild than in recent years due to advances in forestry. Washington State implemented an early detection and early response system that helps to combat wildfires. Wider adoption of this early detection and response system is needed. Stopping wildfires as early as possible is the key factor in reducing air pollution.
Thank you, Christi and Frank. We'd now like to open the floor to questions from journalists. If you have a question, please click on reactions to raise the hand button at the top of your screen, and we'll select you in the order your hands were raised. Once it's your turn to speak, we will unmute your microphone. Please go ahead and state your name and news outlet. And if you would like to ask a question to a specific speaker, please be sure to direct the question to them. We ask to limit to one question plus 2 follow-up questions to give everyone attending the opportunity to ask their questions. And once everyone has had a chance to ask questions, we'll allow further follow-up questions if time allows. So we'd like to go ahead and now open up the floor. Please click the raise hand button if you have a question.
Evan Bush, go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Hi, thanks for doing this. This is Evan Bush with NBC News. I'm just curious if you're able to maybe outline how climate change is shifting air quality, or how it shifted air quality in 2023. Are you seeing more influence of wildfire smoke, and can you measure that? And maybe just help us understand that.
Frank, do you want to take this or me?
Christi, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll follow up on you.
Sure. Yeah, the interconnected nature of climate change and air quality is pretty complicated. One thing that we know for sure is that there are some places in the world that are becoming hotter and drier due to climate change, right? And this is very interconnected with air pollution because hotter and drier climates can lead to drying out of vegetation, which is a tinder bed basically for wildfires. So wildfires are a natural phenomenon. However, they are becoming more frequent and more severe due to the effects of climate change. And what happened in Canada this year is a great example, right? As some regions are experiencing less and less rainfall, vegetation dries out, and wildfires become more intense and more severe.
And I think it's definitely also something that we're interested to pursue in future, to see how the changes in the on the patterns of inhabitants are changing, right? Because we have people who are living now in areas that may be more wildfire prone than previously in some parts of the world, and so overlaying these patterns of population with the exposure of air pollution is definitely an area that needs more work. And this is something that we know that our partners at the United Nations Environmental Program are very interested in. And so there's ongoing work on that in terms of seeing what exposure can be calculated to be coming from wildfire exposure.
Thank you.
Arshad, go ahead and unmute your microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Arshad from CBS News. My question is specifically about South Asia. As your data shows, this seems to be the worst affected region in the world. The development is one, the use of fossil fuels is one area which might be causing the high degrees of pollution. But I don't know if this was the scope of your study, but what else do you think are the causes of such high air pollution in that region?
I think one of the main reasons is what you just mentioned, is the low quality of the fossil fuels being used, right? We have fossil fuels are a problem anywhere, but there's definitely a different grade, right? Right on top of that is the concoction of things being burned in Pakistan, in India, right? Where you're basically compiling, you're burning anything you can get your hand on, including cow dung mixed in with some of the waste materials that can be found. Basically, this is equivalent to waste burning, right? And this is probably the dirtiest fuel source you can have. After that, from our experience, the second dirtiest fuel source is wood, especially when it's burned in a residential setting. This is something that affects all of the world, even here in Switzerland, all throughout Europe in winter. This is one of the reasons why we, even in a major city that normally has very good air quality, in the month between December and March, you could experience air pollution levels that can be as high as India in some cases, with inversion layers and that wood burning going on. And the third one, then it comes coal. Coal definitely also one of the dirty ones. And then as you're moving down, natural gas is definitely one of the cleaner burning sources. So I think the problem that we have in many developing countries is that that basically the waste, anything that's left over that can yield energy, is being burned. And that smoldering burning is basically the big challenge. In addition to that, you have in Pakistan, for example, and India, you have so many kilns where you are producing bricks, right? Again, with very, very dirty fuel sources that are burning by their thousands to produce a building material. That's one of the things that we definitely are seeing.
Yeah. Just to add to that, the geography in the region also plays a major contributing factor. So the northern India plain that runs just south of the Himalayas really acts as a sort of sink for air pollution. So winds blow in across India coming in from the south, and pollution all across India sort of aggregates in the northern plain of India, because as the wind blows north, it collects pollution from all of the cities, and the pollution basically gets stuck in this plain because the wind can't really disperse the pollutants north of the Himalayas. They really act as sort of a wall. And so you have pollution from Pakistan and northern India sort of collecting along this northern India plain. Also, you have pollution from crop burning in the area. It's very fertile, so there's a lot of agriculture there. And so crop burning can also contribute to this. And couple that with temperature inversions where you have very little atmospheric mixing, and you can have really prolonged periods where you have aggregating PM 2.5 concentrations in this region. And then they sort of funnel down to the south and east into Bangladesh. So one of the key issues this year was transboundary haze. And so you can have pollution that actually originates in Pakistan or India moving into Bangladesh, contributing to PM 2.5 concentrations there.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Adriana Perez, go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Adriana. I am a reporter at the Chicago Tribune. And I guess my question is that I'm relatively new to Chicago, but it did feel last summer that we struggled with bad air quality in a way that maybe we hadn't before, right? And specifically because of the Canadian wildfires. So I think that this concept of transboundary haze is so interesting because I guess it muddles the responsibility to sort of fix the root problem of bad air quality, right? But so obviously one of the big systemic solutions would be to reduce burning fossil fuels. And at the lower level, if you're talking about how citizens can protect themselves from those effects, stay indoors, don't run the air conditioner, etc. But is there anything that, say, the mayor of a U.S. city, for example, or the governor of a state, are there any midterm solutions that can be set in place to protect people or at least diminish the effects of wildfires that are happening in another country that you cannot control, unfortunately?
I think one of the things that we're seeing that governments have been doing, and for example, take Los Angeles, right? And Southern California specifically, which is not very well known for good air pollution. And it's not necessarily only transboundary air pollution, but what can you do until efforts even within your own city come to fruition, where you are able to protect your most exposed population. And we've seen that there's efforts being made where, for example, residences close to intermodal rail yards, where there's a lot of diesel soot being produced, are given air purifiers, right? So we actually have programs in place that we see in California where that takes place. And we've also seen that work has been done to protect schools, especially those schools which are year-round exposed to more than their fair share of traffic due to their location close to rail yards, close to busy shipping ports. We see this in Long Beach and Los Angeles, which has one of the busiest harbors, where virtually all of the trucks that are transporting these sea containers are still operating on diesel fuel, and you have many tons of this diesel being basically put in the air right next to schools. So we see that work has been quite successful. This is work that we've seen happen now over the last 15 years, where thousands and thousands of classrooms next to some of these pollution sources have been protected. And where we're also seeing that during the wildfire effects, we've been able to measure, because we work in some of these schools on the monitoring solutions, where we've seen that you can have reductions in the impact, at least inside the classrooms, of these wildfire pollutants in the order of 90%. So you can actually bring down something that outside might be 100 micrograms. You can reduce this down to 10 micrograms. And so you're going from something that's 20 times the annual guideline of the World Health Organization and bring it down during these high pollution events to maybe twice, which at least helps for those few hours that children are inside. And more monitoring by these schools allows these schools to actually set their schedules, make sure that maybe exercise time outdoors will be shortened or suspended for children with asthma. So there is quite a lot of involvement in this area. We now have more than 400 schools around the world that actually are monitoring air quality on the school ground, many times with low-cost air quality monitors. And this is really all over the world. This morning, I was talking to schools in Saudi Arabia that are monitoring outdoor air quality and adjusting their schedules. Every part of the world, people are looking at what can we do at least for our most vulnerable population.
Again, if you have a question, please go ahead and hit the raise hand button. Evan Bush, go ahead.
Thanks again. I'm just wondering how you view this compared to 2022 trends overall. I mean, could you describe this as a decline in air quality worldwide from 2022 to 2023? Or is that maybe overinterpreting the data that you have?
I'll get started, Christi, for Europe. We actually are seeing that air quality in some of the cleanest countries is further improving. We saw improvements in Germany, France, United Kingdom, Switzerland, right? They are all benefiting basically from a certain level of electrification that we're seeing now in traffic, and they're seeing also regulatory changes in terms of what are you allowed to do to heat your home, right? Because that is a major source of air pollution. So for Europe, actually, for many parts of Europe, at least Western Europe, we've seen advances where you may already be at a level that is very close to the World Health Organization standard, and you're still able to see that we're able to drop this. As we said earlier, in many other parts of the world, we've seen that since the pandemic, the economic activity has increased. And sometimes these effort, it looks like, when the economy is not doing so well, maybe the regulation seem to be relaxed, or at least the gross aggregate of all of that activity is more noticeable. And that's at least what we've seen in China and in some other parts. Christi?
Yeah. So we saw improvements in air quality for a little over 3,100 cities. 70 countries, regions, and territories reported reduced annual average concentrations. So those are just some kind of general trends. Where we saw meaningful improvements this year are in the Middle East and North Africa. Actually, there were some regions. Saudi Arabia had a significant decrease in PM2.5 concentrations compared to 2022. And this is in part due to a reduction in sandstorms. So 2022 was a big year for sandstorms in the Middle East. Actually, that even contributed to air pollution in Europe as winds blew dust and particulate matter across into Europe. We saw increased PM2.5 levels in several European cities that correlated with dust storm events. And so we saw some big improvements in Northern Africa and the Middle East as well.
Adriana Perez, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I meant to thank you for your response earlier, Mr. Hams. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes, I'm used to it being pronounced many ways. Hammes
Okay.
is the way we do it here.
Okay, perfect. But yeah, I guess I was just going back to your answer, I guess. Where can I find more information about how these schools are monitoring air quality around the world on site, and maybe some of the ways that the schools here in the United States are, taking proactive steps to protect their students? I think it would be really interesting to include that in what I write.
Sure. And what we do on the platform is, and this is part of the transparency that we have, every city, you will see on the bottom of your city page, you will actually see who is helping to monitor the air quality.
Okay.
So for example, if you go and we have, the way our website is organized is we go from station level, where you basically, we're telling you who's operating that station and where's our data source. Sometimes those are different because we get it from, for example, even if a government station is monitoring it, we may get it from a central website. And sometimes it comes from the provider themselves. So you will actually see how many schools are monitoring by going on the bottom of every page, and you will see that for every city, and you will see that actually also aggregated on a state level in the US and elsewhere, and even on a global level. But what we can do is we can definitely summarize for you some of the schools that are doing that. We have major projects that have been happening by school districts, especially in California.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely seems to be at the forefront here in North America. And we see pockets where suddenly we see that schools are, the pressure of parents are coming to know what their kids are breathing, both inside and outside. And so, for example, we see one of the major cities with many, many schools is Bangkok, right? Because again, Thailand regularly has seasonal air pollution coming in from about December to April or May. And they're basically basing their scheduling for activities just based on these monitors. But we can certainly provide you an insight to see how do you find out how many schools are there in North America at the moment. I believe in North America, there must be about close to 300 schools monitoring air quality. And then globally, probably another close to 200 schools doing that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I will look at the website too and try to see if I can find some more local information. Thank you.
Adriana, I also wanted to comment on your question, and that is highlighting the importance of education and outreach regarding air quality. So I think a lot of people are under the assumption that they can just look at the outside air and think that they understand about what that means about the quality of air, but that's actually a huge misconception. You can't tell just by looking always what the state of the air quality is. And so it's really important to check your local air quality index, to check your local air quality information, because it is highly specific, actually, particularly with PM 2.5. You can have varying levels in locations depending upon emission sources and other things. And so we really encourage people to look at air quality data and treat it just like you would the weather in preparing for your day. And the air quality index is a great tool to be able to do that. And actually, in the United States, how the air quality index is being calculated is changing soon. So the US EPA and the federal government just lowered the national ambient air quality standard for PM 2.5, which means that they are lowering the standard at which they are deeming the threshold where PM 2.5 concentrations pose a risk to human health. So it's just really important to understand that there are really easily accessible tools out there that can make a meaningful difference in making educated choices about protecting your health.
And I can add to that, especially in winter, we see many times, and we've seen it in China, in many other parts of the world, where basically air pollution is assumed to be bad weather, right? It's supposed to be, it's assumed to be fog. And actually what most people don't realize is that fog often is caused by air pollution, because basically it's the condensation of humidity onto these soot particles, right? So when you have very, very clean air and you have not a lot of emission, you actually will have less fog. So many times fog in winter at high pollution periods is caused by the air pollution in the air. And that also masks it, at least for many people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And the fact of, needing to look at the air quality as weather, as you would weather, that's really important. And personally, something I did last summer here in Chicago too. Yeah, thank you both so much.
We have time for maybe 2 more questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand. Ali, go ahead.
Hello. First and foremost, congratulations to IQAir. This report is very important. Well, basically, I'm from Greenpeace. We work on the issue of air pollution as well in many of the countries which has been listed as the topmost countries and topmost capitals. This piece of this report is very important for us because it underscores that lot needs to be done and things are not right. My question is about the curious case of Africa. At one point, you're saying that there is not enough data, so hence the Africa is underrepresented. But we are also seeing that African countries are in the top 10. And then, so what is this like? What is your assumption that things are bad over there, much more worst, or we don't know? If things are maybe bad, so what are the causes for the air pollution in Africa? Yep, thank you.
I think we're seeing that Africa is definitely, as more and more air quality monitoring will take place, we will see that you have areas of very, very bad air pollution. This is where satellite imagery, right, is already giving us today. And we are collecting satellite information, obviously, also to fill in some data gaps, not for the report that comes 100% from stations, but we know that there are interior areas. Chad, for example, right, is right in the epicenter of some of the worst air quality in the world. I think it will be extremely shocking once we start seeing more monitors. And And that brings us also to the point, and this is maybe the lack of motivation sometimes, and we got to recommend governments with a difficult job like India, right, that do actually provide quite a lot of monitoring. And we understand when you measure something, you will find something, right? And it's not always something that you like, but it is the first step in getting there. It's also the first step, I think, creating some empathy and some interest from your local population. We are measuring the engagement on our platform, which is probably another exciting part of future of some of the future reports that are coming out, where we're actually seeing how much engagement is produced by air quality data. And unfortunately, some of the most interested people in air quality are living in some of the most in some of the cleanest areas in the world, right? So unfortunately, high air pollution does not coincide with a high level of public awareness and interest yet. But we do see that once we start talking about that, that can change. And we've seen cities that maybe previously had, and we measure this with followers, right? We have people basically with their apps and on the website that are selecting certain cities that they're interested in to follow on a daily basis. And that we can measure, and we can measure how often that engagement and interest is, and we can also measure the effectiveness of government work doing this. I think this was a year or two ago, where in Nairobi, we had a project together with the United Nations Environmental Program and a local provider, where they actually there was space donated on some public signage within the city, where they were basically advertising the air quality index, and that were trying to create some awareness. And we saw that during that time, the interest and the app downloads for the air quality apps were increasing by a factor of 20, right? So we see there is interest, there's just not the awareness yet. And this is why we think the engagement from actually putting up your own station, right? We have universities, we have researchers, we have nonprofit organizations, we have doctors and hospitals who are putting up these stations. That is such an important step, because you're basically taking people along, right? And you're ending this apathy that, number one, we are not involved, we don't understand, and people start asking these questions. The important part of that is to make sure that we take government stakeholders along on that journey, because sometimes, you have people there in the environmental agencies that are suddenly getting a lot of reporters knocking on their door, asking them why they're not doing certain things. And then there is, they feel victimized basically by this movement that's in a way taking the monopoly away from governments and shifting it over to the private citizens. And I think at that part, it is so important to make them part of the solution, because ultimately, first of all, it makes them less defensive, right? We many times still have the opinion of governments that unless we measure air quality, it cannot be valid, which we've seen that purely from the technology being used today, it is very, very good. And sure, the regulatory grade sensors that are costing 100, sometimes 1,000 times more than low-cost sensors, in the absolute accuracy and precision can be higher, but that doesn't help you if you have one every 1,000 kilometers, right? So I would say the accuracy and the representativeness of what's being measured by citizens these days is good enough to give governments a very good opportunity to understand what's going on. And everybody sharing that data is now becoming more and more important. And that's ultimately what IQAir is doing, right? We're taking this fragmented information from everywhere and we're contextualizing it. And ultimately, we are engaging people, and we're basically allowing people to create a comparison, right? And once you have that with a ranking, that allows you to really create a story that's interesting for people to listen to. Thank you.
Actually, I just wanted to mention something about Nairobi. I was actually just looking at this data yesterday. So PM 2.5 levels have fallen every year over the past 4 years in Nairobi, and it has the second largest number of air quality monitors of any of the measured cities in Africa. So, you know, it's hard to say correlation versus causation, but it's definitely a meaningful trend that PM 2.5 levels across the city have been dropping, and it is a highly monitored city.
We have time for one more question if someone wants to raise their hand. All right,
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, we can go ahead and conclude the question portion of the press event. If you have any further questions, anything to follow up on, or you would like to request a more in-depth one-on-one interview with one of our speakers, please feel free to email pr.na@iqair.com. Again, that email is pr.na@iqair.com. A recording of this event will also be posted on IQAir's YouTube channel shortly. Thank you again for joining us for the public release of the 2023 World Air Quality Report. Thank you to Frank and Christi, everyone else who contributed to the report, and everyone who attended. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.